Okay. So good morning, everyone. We are good to start now. This is Mashuda here, Head of Accounts and Compliance Department at ADS. A very warm welcome to all participants joining today's webinar on e-invoicing, readiness, and roadmap. We are pleased to have you with us as we discuss one of the most significant upcoming developments in the UAE tax and regulatory landscape. As many of you may be aware that e-invoicing UAE is moving towards a structural digital e-invoicing framework under the guidance of the FTA, which is aimed at enhancing transparency, improving compliance, and streamlining business reporting process. This session is designed to help you understand not only the regulatory expectations, but also the practical roadmap your organization can follow to ensure a smooth transition. We encourage you to actively participate and engage during the discussion. Let us begin. E-invoicing in the UAE, readiness and roadmap. Understanding e-invoicing concepts, benefits, and business impacts from traditional invoicing to e-invoicing, a practical transition guide which we are going to oversee in today's webinar. Coming to the basic introduction. What is e-invoicing? This is something which is going all around the compliance aspect these days in UAE. E-invoicing is a structured form of invoice data that is issued and exchanged electronically between a supplier and a buyer, and it is reported electronically to the UAE Federal Tax Authority. Few brief highlights about e-invoicing. E-invoicing is mandatory for any person conducting business in the UAE. So you should be clear of this, that it is mandatory for any person which is conducting business in the UAE, regardless of their VAT registration. So e-invoicing is nowhere based on if you are registered for VAT, you are supposed to go for e-invoicing. So irrespective of whether you are registered for VAT or not, you are supposed to go for e-invoicing, unless it is specifically excluded as per the Article 4 of the ministerial decision. So there are few businesses which are exempted. They are excluded for e-invoicing, such as government entities. Then there is international transportation of passenger, international transportation of goods. So there are few businesses which are exempt. So if it is excluded for e-invoicing, then it's not required. Otherwise, in general, it is mandatory for any person conducting business in the UAE. The timeline for implementing e-invoicing is as per the phased implementation plan. So there's a timeline which has been put up in the ministerial decision number 244 of 2025, which says as when is the deadline for implementation of e-invoicing. So it's based on the turnover of the company. If the turnover is 50 million or more, the deadline to appoint an ASP is by 30th, latest by 31st of July 2026. And you have to go live by 1st of January 2027. Whereas if it's a business whose turnover is less than 50 million, you are supposed to appoint an ASP provider latest by 31st of March 2027. And the business needs to go live on e-invoicing by 1st of July 2027. There would be a participant identifier number which would be issued for e-invoicing, which would be your tax identification number. So participant identifier for e-invoicing is nothing but the TIN. Now, what is TIN? The taxpayer who have registered for FTA for any of the tax type, may it be VAT, may it be corporate tax, will have an assigned TIN already as a part of registration process. TIN is nothing but it is the first 10 digit of the TRN number that has been issued to you. A person that is within the scope of electronic invoicing. So a person might not be registered for other tax type, maybe VAT or corporate tax, but the person might be covered. The taxable business or that business having turnover of either more than 50 million or less than 50 million will have mandatory requirement to get involved into electronic invoicing. So they must register with the FTA to obtain their TIN. Please note that even if you are part of a tax group, suppose there's a tax group which has been formed by your business, your TIN would be the first 10 digit of your own TRN number, neither than the group TRN. So even if it's a tax group, each business would have a separate TIN which would be based on their individual TRN number rather than the group's TRN number. there's something which is important in e-invoicing, which most of us is aware about, but do not have detailed understanding of, as to what it is. It is the five corner model. This is the framework under which electronic invoices are issued and distributed in the UAE, with each corner being as follows. So we have corner 1, which is the supplier's corner. We have corner 2, which is the supplier's ASP. Then we have corner 3, which is the recipient or the buyer's ASP. We have corner 4, which is the recipient, the buyer. And we have corner 5, where sits the FTA. Coming to the roadmap, how is the electronic invoicing implementation roadmap looks like? So it's like there's a seller. The seller will create an invoice. So the supplier will create an invoice which would go to the ASP, who would validate and transmit this invoice. It would be a secure transfer of e-invoicing using the PEPAL to buyer service provider. Buyer service provider will give this invoice. So the buyer will receive the invoice, and ultimately it will be in the buyer hand in e-invoicing format. And all this is through FTA as well. So all this FTA would be aware about when was the invoice raised. So all the details go directly to the FTA as well. How would it start? So this is the roadmap as to how the e-invoicing begin. So first is the start. So initiative is via the EmaraTax. So here the responsibility is of the businesses, not the ASP, to initiate the onboarding through the EmaraTax portal. Here the objective is to begin transition to e-invoicing system. Then comes step 1, which is understanding requirement. Here, our goal is to build awareness and readiness strategy. So what has to be done in this step? We need to study onto the regulatory changes, which is the VAT decree law, executive regulations, cabinet and ministerial decision. Because even if e-invoicing is coming into picture, business needs to keep themselves aware about what would be the VAT treatment that would be applicable to the supply that they are doing. They need to define onto the implementation readiness plan. They have to identify changes in the accounting system if it is required, ERP, and the invoicing software as well. Then comes the next step, which is the ASP provider. So this is very important. That's the reason the deadline has been given by FTA to appoint the ASP provider. Here, the goal is to choose the technology partner who would be the ASP provider for the business. Next come once the ASP provider has been appointed, the next step that we have to focus on would be to the testing phase. So your goal is to ensure the system compatibility and accuracy. So you need to define the invoice data transmission approach, ensure that the system is ready for the integration that would happen, perform end-to-end invoice exchange testing, and even if there's any validation to be done, reporting validations also has to be completed. So here our goal would be to ensure system compatibility and accuracy. Last step would be to go live. So once the ASP has been set up, testing phase is completed, last step is to go live. Here we start live e-invoicing operation. It is important at this step that we define roles and responsibilities with ASP, begin with invoice exchanging and reporting to the authority, and resolve issues if it is anything which is coming during the initial phase. With that, the roadmap ends as to system goes live. There's ongoing governance and compliances, which keeps as and when there is different changes in the governance or compliances, we need to keep ourselves updated on it. And here the goal is to maintain continuous compliances. So ASP needs to be updated for any business changes, any system update, and we need to ensure that we follow governance framework for monitoring, issuing any resolutions, and compliance tracking. Okay, so with that, here are few key penalties which would be applicable under electronic invoicing. So first would be if you're not implementing the electronic invoicing system. Suppose a business is required to implement an ASP, or the business is required to go live by 1st July 2027 for businesses whose turnover is less than 50 million. And in that case, if it's not been implemented, then there's a penalty of 5,000 dirhams per month. If the business is not issuing e-invoice on time, again the penalties comes to around 100 dirhams per invoice, and it can reach maximum to 5,000 dirhams per month. If the businesses is not keen on issuing credit notes on time, the penalty is 100 dirhams per credit note, which may go up to 5,000 per month. If there's any system failure that you are facing, maybe there's some problem with the ASP tech part, you are not able to issue the electronic invoices, it has to be reported. If it is not reported to the FTA, then the penalty is of 1,000 per day. Not reporting system failure, this is from the recipient side. So it's the responsibility of both the issuer and the recipient are equally responsible to report any failure, system failure. Same obligations arise for recipient as well. So penalty comes up to 1,000 dirhams per day. If you're not updating changes with the ASP or the authority, so if there's changes in data which is not updated on time, penalty comes up to 1,000 dirhams per day. So we need to ensure that whatever comes into picture as a new law has a backup of penalty to it. So the reason is that we ensure we complete the requirements as and when it arises, rather than delaying it and resulting in ending up paying penalties. Data storage and archival is also very important under e-invoicing. In line with Article 3(1) of the Tax Procedures Executive Regulations, data relating to issuance, transmission, and receipt of electronic invoices must be retained for a period of 5 years for businesses which are registered for VAT, and even for the businesses which are not registered for VAT, the period is still 5 years from the end of the calendar year, and for real estate, it's for a period of 7 years. Coming to e-invoices categories, here are a few categories which has been provided and explained by the FTA as to what category of invoices e-invoices would be. There are total of 6 categories of e-invoice. It's the tax invoice, tax credit note, invoices, and credit note. Now, how it gets divided? First is standard billing. When I say 6, it's like we have electronic tax invoices, first thing which would come into picture. Then we have self-billed electronic tax invoice. We have commercial invoices. We have electronic credit notes. And if it's self-billing being applicable, then we have self-billing electronic tax invoice, self-billing electronic credit note. However, self-billing is not applicable if you are issuing an invoice or a credit note. There is no electronic invoice category for provisional invoices. So if there's any provisional invoices or estimates or performers being given, there is no electronic category for such type of invoices. Every provisional invoice issued should be an electronic invoice. Any adjustment. So if you're supposed to issue just a provisional based invoices you wanted to issue and you're not sure of what would be the actual price of that supply which is happening, any adjustment which is done, you can adjust into the provisional amount that has been invoiced. It can be either accommodated. If there is an increase, you can either issue an additional electronic invoice, or if there is a reduction in the supply value that you have issued an invoice for, you can issue a credit note and do adjustment accordingly. Here are a few mandatory fields which should be there in e-invoicing. If you can see on the screen, it's invoice details comes, invoice number should be there, date should be there, type code should be there, currency should be there, transaction flag should be there, payment means, due date, and specification ID. So here it's been given for all the items as of brief what fields should be there. These are the mandatory fields. The seller details should have details such as name, TIN, legal registration, and so on. Same comes for the buyer details, document totals, how it should appear, tax breakdown. There is items which should be there in the tax breakdown as well, and the line items details are also required to be mentioned under e-invoicing format. Here is just a brief to understand how does a human readable version of a sample electronic invoice look like. So if you can see on the screen, we have seller details, we have buyer details, we have item details, we have VAT breakdown. So this is a detailed of the mandatory fields which should be there when issuing an electronic invoice. Comes the main discussion about which we all are actually keen to know. How would our customer receive the invoice, or how would the invoices be given to our customer? Because we are going to issue an electronic invoice which would go through the ASP provider. So new flow after e-invoicing, it would not be like today's how it is being shared in today's time, like PDF via email or WhatsApp. Rather, it would follow a structured digital exchange via ASP plus PayPal network. So the supplier will create invoice would be sent to ASP, and invoice would be shared to your customer through the PayPal network via the ASP provider. How would the customer receive invoice? Customer may receive invoice in 3 possible ways. First is directly into their ERP system. So this is the primary method, and in which the invoice would go directly into the system of the customer. Supplier is Zoho, ASP is there which comes in between, and the customer is SAP. So invoice will ought to appear in the customer SAP. Through second method of getting the invoice would be through their ASP portal. So every business would have the ASP portal, which will have record of all the invoices which is being issued to them. So from there also customer can view the invoice. Third would be the human readable copy. This is an option which would be available to the customers. So here is a box which explains before and after invoicing impact. So before it was PDF via email mostly. After invoicing, it is structured data via system. Before we used to do manual entry for invoices to the customer. Now it's auto integration. So there's nothing manually being done here. There were chances of error earlier. Here it's validated, invoice gets validated before it's being shared to the customer. Before there was no real-time tracking, like maybe you will be generating invoice on the first day and it is shared with the customer on the last day or somewhere in between the month. Now it will be real-time exchange. You create the invoice now, it goes to the customer at the same time. What would be the impact of e-invoicing on accounting, VAT, and corporate tax? So accounting, what changes it would be? Earlier so your main impact would be that accountant roles get shift from just data entry to review and compliance control. So accountant would be more keen to know as to what has to be done to ensure that the electronic invoice which would be shared to their customer is compliant with all the requirements of the FTA. So here the role shift from data entry person to review and compliance control. VAT, what would be the changes? VAT filing becomes more system driven and review based. It's not just data collection, rather all the details would be extracted directly from the FTA, because FTA reads all this which is happening between the supplier and the buyer through the ASP provider. Under corporate tax, what changes it would be? CT will become more reliable and structured data. This is a brief table which explains as to how the differences would impact. So area, accounting, manual delayed, automated real times, VAT filing, data collection heavy, system driven, all this would be taken care of in electronic invoicing. Coming to getting ready for electronic invoicing. This is where we need to understand briefly as to what is to be done. We need to understand what is the requirement for electronic invoicing. It's mandatory to select an ASP provider. Test electronic invoice exchange and reporting. So there's a phase where it is given where you can test as to whether your electronic invoices are going exact the right way. And then final is to go live with electronic invoicing. Ongoing, it's necessary to manage the changes. Okay, with that, we will have Daksha sir to take up the e-invoice scenario.
Hi, once again. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mashuda. We got to understand what is a brief about e-invoicing and a lot of technical terms. Can everyone hear me properly? Am I audible?
Yes, you are well audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. So we went through some of the terms, we went through some of the important aspect of it and the penalties of it. I know for a fact that many of the things are very technical, very hard terms to digest when you hear a lot of things. Maybe for us, it's pretty simple because like we deal with it.
I was breaking. Could you please repeat again?
Okay. So I was just trying to say that it was a lot of terms, it was a lot of technical terms and, non-existing words in day-to-day scenarios. But then it might sound pretty familiar for us because we are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, you're right.
So I'm just trying to say that, don't take it all to your head now. We'll try to make it as simple as it can be so that you can understand the things properly. So we have gone through what is the invoicing, and then we have a PEPOL certification for making this thing happen, PEPOL validation to make it happen. And also we went through what are the important penalties. I would say that keep the penalties thing in mind. One thing pretty short, that is, if you don't follow e-invoicing, it is being heavily penalized in UAE because you have to comply with this. That is the only intention of the government. Now let's look at what are the scenarios for e-invoicing. The first scenario is like, let's say you're dealing with any kind of free zone companies. In a sense, you have a company in the mainland and you have a supplier who is in the free zone, or vice versa. You are in the free zone and you have a company which is based out of mainland. And what happens is like, example is like, as I've said, uh, even there can be scenarios where your company is based in free zone and you're exporting out of the country. So as per the e-invoicing, now the things are going to change. What is going to change? Let's say your customer, let's say you're the supplier for this transaction, and your customer and the beneficiary of this particular transaction is different. Then on the invoicing thing, you have to mention the customer as well as the beneficiary of this transaction. That is the only thing which is different. And there's something called commercial invoice, which is the invoices for export, which is issued in case like, you don't have to issue a VAT invoice. And this applies to the commercial invoice as well. So to keep it simple, if a free zone is involved, you have to mention the beneficiary details as well as the customer details. That's how simple it is. And the second thing what we have to discuss now is about deemed supplier. So deemed suppliers are nothing but, you have had a transaction. Maybe, you gave some goods for free, or you use some of the assets for yourself, or you have registered your company from VAT and you have some assets which is left in your company after the re-registration. So this scenario comes into place, which is called deemed supplier. In this case, you have to have the buyer electronic address as the specific address which you can see on the screen, which is basically 0235 semicolon 9900000097. All right. And no invoice exchange is required if the invoice is not issued. So like only reporting is required in case like you have a deemed supplier. And again, deemed supplier is nothing but you're giving some goods for free or using some assets for yourself. I hope it's clear. And in case of any doubts, just shoot me the questions and I'll be more than happy to answer it. Now, the next thing, what is coming in place is margin scheme. If anyone of you guys are dealing with used cars, you would be knowing this, that in case of used cars, this is what we use. Like, for example, let's say you buy a car for 100,000 dirhams and you sell it for 150,000 dirhams. Your margin is 50,000 dirhams. So on this margin, you're supposed to calculate the VAT and pay to the government as per the earlier scenarios. But now onwards, as per the e-invoicing and to validate this particular transaction through the PEPOL, you need to show the VAT amount as 0. And it applies, it doesn't apply to commercial invoice, all right? So it applies only to the VAT invoice or tax invoices. And let's look into the fourth scenario now, which is summary invoice. We all deal with the banks, and we know for a fact that at the month end, the bank sends a summary invoice, which is basically the transaction which is happening for the whole month, which is being summarized into a single invoice, and they give it as a tax invoice. So that is what this summary invoice is all about. And in case of summary invoice, what really happens is can you please go up? So what really happens is like some of the fields, which is there in the invoicing fields, must be recorded as 0. And if there's a negative total, you have to issue a credit invoice. And the reason for doing this invoice level, some fields to be 0 is again to have the PEPOL validation happening for your e-invoice, because you generate an invoice, it goes to the ASP, which is basically a PEPOL validation, and then it goes to your buyer and also to the FTA. So to pass through this, you need to keep some of the fields as 0, and I don't think so there is like mandate. This is something which we have to be bothered about because we don't deal with any kind of summary totals as such on a day-to-day basis. So this is that fourth scenario. All right. Now let's go to the next scenario, which is basically continuous supply. Let's say you are providing supplies to one of your customer on a monthly basis or a recurring basis. You're giving some kind of a subscription model. This is very much important for us because like we have our clients are mostly retainers. We bill them on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or on a yearly basis. So maybe we have retainers, maybe we have installments, and then there's something called milestone payments, which is very common in construction industries. All right. So in this case, what is required is like whatever calculations you're making for a particular payment. Let's say, you have your first installment to come in, then you have something called retention calculations, which if you're dealing with any of the construction things, you must be very familiar about. And in that case, you need to have a separate commercial document, which entails like how these calculations have happened and how you have arrived at that particular figure. And then you need to issue the invoice just for that particular payment due as an e-invoice, and then you have to follow the procedures. That is what the fifth scenario is all about, which is continuous supply. And yes, it applies to a commercial invoice. Now let's look into what is agent billing. So let's say, you are an insurance broker or you are a supplier of some services for which you are an agent. You take it from someone else and, you take it and you supply it. All right. And the examples are like insurance broker billing or some kind of service. You're the third party supplier of that. And then what really happens is like the supplier who supplied this goods on behalf of the agent becomes responsible for the invoicing, not the agent. So this is very important. If you're dealing with any of the products where you are supplying the goods as an agent, then your supplier, that is the main supplier of these goods, are responsible for providing the e-invoice. And yes, it applies to commercial invoice. Any doubts till now? Thanks. We have two more scenarios to go through. But otherwise, I can go to the next one, which is e-commerce. All right, the silence, I hope, is that everything is clear. Otherwise, you can make your questions ready and then we can answer it at the end. Now, the seventh scenario is basically e-commerce supply. Let's say, the supplies happen through online platforms like website sales, marketplace transactions. In this case, also, it's same. Even though the e-commerce platform like Amazon or Talabat or Kita or whatever for that particular reason, you are responsible. The supplier who supplies this goods is responsible for creating a commercial invoice, the e-invoice, and give it to a buyer if it is a B2B transaction. So yes, it applies to commercial invoice as well. Now the last scenario is basically exports. Let's say you are sending some supplies to customers which is outside the UAE, export of goods, overseas services. Then you must issue an invoice. And in case like your buyer doesn't have a control ID, a unique ID must be used, which is there on the screen, which is basically 0235 9900000099, and it doesn't apply to commercial invoice. So these are the 8 scenarios which you should be very careful about when you're doing the invoicing, and make sure that you're complying it to the core. And in case you have any doubts or anything regarding these scenarios, you should engage a proper qualified chartered accountant or a consultant to handle it. So let's go to the next scenarios. All right. Now we have prepared a proper e-invoicing readiness checklist. So the purpose behind making this particular checklist, this is 17-step checklist, which entails everything which is required for you to make sure that you are complying with the e-invoicing. So always we tell to our clients that keep a 90 days roadmap to make sure that you are complying with this e-invoicing so that you don't end up getting a lot of penalties as we discussed before. So this is the 17-step checklist, which we have prepared for you to make sure that you are e-invoice ready. So I'm not going to explain each and everything because it will be a bit boring for you to go through this. So yeah, this is the 17th step. And in case you have any doubts, we'll be sending this readiness checklist and we'll be sending some of the webinar notes for you to refer, like the penalties, the other things. We'll not be sending exact slides, what we're showing now, because it is again a lot of technical things. So we'll be sending this checklist, we'll be sending the penalties, we'll be sending the roadmap, what is required for you to make sure that you are compliant. So the 17 steps, make sure that you are getting ready for yourself so that your e-invoicing readiness is proper and that roadmap is to the very best extent implemented properly. So now let's go to the next one, which is like how we can help you to make sure that your e-invoicing compliance is ready. So this you can follow by yourself. All right. So these are the steps what we do to make sure that your e-invoicing compliance is in proper order. Maybe you can do it by yourself. So the first thing what you have to do is like you have to have a proper assessment of your software, and in case like it does not align with the UAE invoicing requirements, please do a migration now. All right, like whether you're you're using SAP, Oracle, Zoho, Tally, QuickBooks, Sage, or whatever, we will assign it. I mean, we'll assess this particular software, and then we'll help you to understand whether this particular software is enough for your operations or you need to upgrade the software. And after that, you need to select an ASP. As of now, there are 22 ASPs on the website of the FTA, and you can select one of the ASPs like Taxila, Signet, Flick, ClearTax, and many different kinds of ASPs. So ASP selection is very important because some of the ASPs provide API integration, some of the ASPs doesn't provide API integration. So you wanted to attach to your existing software. You don't want to change your software. Maybe you'll have to change your ASP. So on that basis, you have to select the ASPs and then onboard it. And the next thing is system readiness and integration. Once you have finalized, once you have assessed your software, once you have assessed your ASP, the next thing what is required is make sure that all the mandatory invoice fields are captured and you are able to generate a structured invoice. So what we would help you, or what you have to make sure is make sure that your ERP and the ASP is integrated properly. We have a tech team for that. We have Aditya for that particular reason here, where he'll be walking through some of the technical things which is required for this. And then you have to coordinate with the IT or the software teams for that. All right. The next thing where we can help you or make sure that you are doing it is basically obtaining your TIN number and making sure that you're getting that whole participant ID, all right, which is a specific number which is attached to your TIN. And then you have proper FTA EmaraTax registration. And the fifth step is testing and go live support, where we have to make sure that the invoicing transmission is properly tested and validation is being done properly so that there's no room for error before it's mandatory to go live. All right. And the last one, the final procedure, is compliance and the process setup. Because as you have seen the penalties, if your ASP is not working properly and you have not checked it, you might end up in a penalty of 1,000 dirhams per day, which is very, very huge, right? So we designed the internal process for invoice issuance, error handling, system failure reporting, and establish a government framework, governance framework, so that you can make sure that you're complying and your internal controls are in place, your people, process, and the tech is being properly aligned to make sure that this particular migration is happening properly. The other one is VAT and corporate tax alignment, making sure that your VAT, your corporate tax, and the invoicing is aligned and in place so that there's no room for error and there's no compliance risk and penalties. All right. And the one is training and ongoing support, which is the 8th step. Make sure that this is happening properly, whereby you train your people to make sure that they are well aligned to issue an invoice and how to use the system and provide proper support wherever required to align with the government requirements. All right. The risk mitigation and penalty avoidance is something which comes as a product of making sure that all these 8 steps are being done properly. So we will make sure that implementation is proper, invoice reporting is done properly. So with this, I would like to welcome Aditya from our tech team. So to explain about the technical perspective which is required to make sure that you are implementing the invoice properly and staying penalty free and audit ready for the FTA. Thank you, everyone. And I'll be open to the questions at the end. So yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. First, me just check if I am audible. Can I get a check?
Yeah, well audible.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. So the main point or the main things that I would like to discuss are just to make this thing that seems very big or very technical in implementation to sound super simple, so that you are not confused about what exactly it is that you have to do. So I think Mashuda ma'am in the start of the webinar itself said that invoice is structured data now. So when you hear something like that, you will obviously be confused about what structured data is. So just imagine, instead of sending a paragraph to somebody, you start sending in form fields. So when you fill a form, you have a name for it, like the field itself, and what you are actually typing or what you're actually giving in this format is the answer there. So if somebody asks you what your name is, you are just putting in, let's say, Aditya, and so on. So you'll have to only fill out fields. And most ASP tools right now are split into two or actually three. So I think somebody already asked a question about unknown software platforms. I'm not sure what they meant by that, but you can actually still do that, but again, compliance becomes that person's risk, which is not really recommended. So the most easy way is to actually utilize the tool itself to raise your invoices from now on, or whenever you are supposed to be compliant, based on what your revenue is, based on what you're actually doing. And the first step is that you can have the tool itself. So there are a few ASPs who give out a tool where all you have to do is fill out a form, which is in fact your invoice. And the second, or the a second easier way, would be to connect it to your existing ERP software. If you already have an invoicing software or a bookkeeping software, for example, Zoho Books, or let it be into its QuickBooks, or it could also be SAP's bookkeeping software as well. So all of these allow a bridge to be connected between your existing software, which is the platform that you're raising your invoices on, and to the new ESP that you choose. So if you choose an ESP that is exactly priced for your own volume or for your own business or business category, you can also choose to have a channel or a bridge that is connecting both. So that is the second, and that is the middle path that you can choose. And third would be having to build it all on your own, which is, like I said, on your head. Like, the compliance becomes something that you will have to look after, and there can be rejections from the FTA or the ASP itself. And there are also a lot of standards that have to be followed because of PEPAL. So PEPAL is nothing but a network. So it is nothing but your internet, where all that can go through, or all the data that passes, is your invoices. And specifically for the UAE set of invoices, we have something called a PEPAL PINT AE, so which is just a standard, and you don't have to really understand what the standard is actually doing, unless you're really, like I said, using the third path where you're going to be connecting everything on your own. Uh, and the next thing would be the system to system exchange. So what this does is, once you're on your ERP or on the tool itself, your whole communication switches entirely to that. You don't have to rely on your email. You don't have to rely on WhatsApp. You don't have to rely on any other communication channel except for the tool itself or your invoicing platform. And the third one would be the automated validation. So automated validation is nothing but whenever something fails, your message doesn't go through, your invoice doesn't pass. So anytime something has been set up the right way, you would not be able to send a faulty invoice. So for example, you have put in the wrong VAT treatment for a different category of product that you're selling, and by accident you hit send. So in the normal scenario, you would be forced to see when that mistake happens and make the change and send them a new one. But what this does is, once you have an ASP in between and you're using the right platforms, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to check if it's correct or not. And if something fails, only then will you have to actually check if it is correct or wrong. So I think we can go on to the next slide. Last few points are just this. So system readiness requirements, I think we've already spoken about that. Your accounting software or your ERP must provide the integration. And if not, like Dakshisa pointed out, it's better to migrate to someone like that so that you're not non-compliant and you don't risk having to pay that fine of 1000 AED every day. And next is the data quality dependency. Since we are relying on the PayPal network and the FTA itself, all of our data is stored in a very specific format. And in any case where you have to actually check if your data is correct, it will always be correct because it is stored exactly how it needs to be stored. And when I gave you the example of a form, imagine filling up a form and keeping it in your locker and removing it maybe 10 years later, the form is still the same. So that's exactly what data quality dependency means. And enhanced record keeping. So obviously, it just makes it very easy for us to keep track of everything that we have done, or every invoice we've raised, everything that we have bought, everything comes to one platform. So that ends it about the technical side. And the pricing is just for a reference, and it can change from ASP2 to ASP. It can also change between platforms who are doing the middleware or the bridge that I said. So if you're supported by Zoho and the ASP is charging a different price only for Zoho, then it depends entirely on them.
Thank you so much, Aditya. Thank you everyone for patiently listening to our webinar. We are now open for the questions that you are having. I know this is a new concept which has been come up with the FTA with lots of terms
Excuse
being
me,
introduced.
Mashuda, ma'am, you are not well audible. Could you
Is
please
it
repeat?
fine now, sir? Hello?
Yeah, yes.
Yes. So yes, with that, we would like to say that we are now open for the questions that any one of you is having with respect to the e-invoicing, which has been come up in UAE. So yes, you can put down your questions in the chat box, or even you can unmute yourself and speak up for any doubts or queries that you have. In addition, I would please request you that we would be dropping our feedback form in the chat box. I request you all to please log in and give your feedback about the seminar.
Yep. Can I ask?
Yeah.
So this ASP, like we have to integrate our, like, contact the ASP. Let's say I'm providing the service of e-invoicing to my client, and let's say my client is just a bakala. So whether he needs to be like connect his system with the ASP, or there's any like manual or something. I mean, for the small businesses, they do they need to do all these things, or there an alternative?
I shall take up the question. Yes, Mr. Saral, the example that you have taken is a grocery. So I'm replying on that basis, and when you have further questions, you can ask follow-up questions. Okay. See, when it comes to a grocery, they mainly do B2C, consumer, directly to the consumer, the individuals.
Yep.
So in the invoicing implementation phases, now B2C is exempted. Okay, so we can, so that is a straight away. So B2C, any service, any industry in B2C is exempted as of now. They do not have to implement e-invoicing in this phase. Okay. The second thing, let's say business, mainly they do B2C, but sometimes they do B2B. For example, let's take a restaurant. They majorly serve individuals, but sometimes they conduct parties and they invoice to the businesses. So there what happens, they are raising invoice to B2B. So maybe it's once in a month, or even if once in a year, that is a B2B transaction. So they have to consider as a B2B. They are doing B2B transaction, and implement e-invoicing is mandatory for them, regardless of the number of transactions, regardless of the industry. So the condition is very simple. If you do the B2B and B2G transaction, e-invoicing system implementation is mandatory. As long as they do B2C transactions, at this phase, it is not mandatory, or it is not necessary. But there are certain industry or some the people can do voluntarily. That is the third part of this question. Okay, they can do. Let's consider a supermarket. a hypermarket. They mainly serve B2C. But understand that they have got lots of suppliers. So they will benefit by implementing e-invoicing. Yeah, but when related to the B2B transaction, the B2C transaction are major. Still, they will benefit by implementing e-invoicing system. It is recommendable. If they wish, they can do voluntary e-invoicing system implementation. I hope this
Okay.
question is answered. If you still have any follow-up questions, please go ahead.
No, thank you so much. Yeah.
Welcome.
We have a question in the chat, which is from Fadil. Do you think that deemed supply or resale of like used car is considered as a gap to escape from VAT or corporate tax? So yeah, you mean to say that you're asking us an opinion whether it is considered to be like that. But then I'll tell you what is happening here. All right. See, you are coming to an e-invoicing system. The whole system is now the first rollout is to B2B and B2G transactions. What really happens is every transaction is being recorded. Like, if someone has sold you some goods, that is also being recorded. And you are trying to escape it. Like, for example, like deemed supply or, or through like the resale or the margin scheme. I think you're referring to this margin scheme. It's never a gap because like every transaction, every single transaction is being recorded in the FTA now, and it will be now the FTA is using something called targeted auditing, or they are using AI platforms. And last year they almost doubled the inspections because they are doing something called targeted auditing, because it's being used by the AI, and the AIs are properly picking up the persons who are escaping the system, or like trying to evade tax, or any kind of malpractices. Now for the FTA, like well before the e-invoicing itself, FTA is very strong. Like they're not looking at this whether you're doing big transactions or small transactions. If you're doing something wrong, the UAE government, you know how efficient the government is, you know how the government runs here. Like there's no excuse for doing any kind of thing. So I would say that there is no gap. Please don't interpret it as the gap and try to do something. And I really don't want you to get into any kind of troubles. So that's the reason. So there is no gap. Everything is being properly aligned. And then we have some more questions here.
Yeah, I shall take up that question, sir.
Perfect.
Yeah, what are the major changes in e-invoicing, specifically invoicing? Okay, going to make the current invoice practice. Okay, it's a very good question. There are multiple dimensions to answer, but I'll start with the regulatory perspective. Let's say the first thing, that we have, as per the VAT regulation, we have simplified invoicing and detailed invoicing. So hereafter, once the e-invoicing is implemented, there won't be any more the simplified invoice format, because there's only one format for the standard supply and tax supplies. So no more simplified invoice will be the, in a legal perspective, that is one of the changes going to be. Similarly, the zero-rated supply, exempted supply. See, some supplies in certain scenarios, the zero-rated supply. Let's say this way. So we are obligated to raise tax invoices for standard rated supply and zero-rated supply. Exempted supplies, we don't have to raise invoice, or the obligation is no more there. But when we implemented the invoicing, these exemptions will not be there. For every supply, if it is B2B, B2G, you have to comply the invoicing format. You have to follow the structure, and you have to issue invoicing only. So there is no more that exemption. Even certain cases, zero rate supply also we issue commercial invoices, right? That also will not be there anymore, or no more exemptions or excuses. That is the second thing. And the third perspective is actually the credit note, right? They have made a small change. I mean, let's say for better understanding, I'll say this way. When you issue an e-invoicing, there can be 3 different outcome. Okay. Now I can see some question here also. I'm connecting to that. So let's say we are invoicing, issuing an invoice. It can completely accepted by your customer. So because it is a real time, so your customer has to accept it. Okay. Here the customer can accept it completely accepted the invoice, the normal scenario. Then the second scenario can be completely rejected. The invoice is not acceptable due to some reason, various reasons. The third scenario is partially accepted. Okay. So let's say you have delivered something and one item went wrong, or the item name is went wrong, or transaction, something went wrong. It is not matching with the actual item. So they have rejected it. Okay, fine. So it's a partial. So this can be the 3 outcome happens. Let's say we have to issue credit note for the second and third scenario, right? Because completely rejected means we have to raise another invoice for that. Or if partially, the third scenario is partially rejected. Here in the updation, legal updation is that you can raise a credit note only for that amount. You don't have to complete the original amount, original value of the invoice. That you don't have to replicate. Only you can raise a credit note against that value and the VAT amount. So it's simplified, because hereafter the credit note scenario is going to be huge, because no more cancellation of invoice, no more amendment of invoices. And you can't have a practice of pro forma. And this kind of adjustment cannot be, because it's real time. So you have only one option, issued an invoice. So if there is any correction, you have to make the credit note. So the number of credit note issuance scenarios will be huge. So that is the third legal perspective we can say. Then comes I have already see, it's not only legal. See, look at this. It's not actually modifying the invoicing that you do. It's not that. It's also changes in the process. Mashuda, could you please go back to the scenarios invoicing? We'll take that portion.
Okay.
We'll try to simplify it for our participants.
Yeah.
See, as Mr. Aditya in technical part, he explained that there are different transaction type, and Dakshay sir also covered that part, different transaction type and scenarios. I'll wait for the screen to open.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. See, before this slide, the categories. See, so far, when you issue an invoice, there is no VAT type selection, like standard rated supply or zero rated supply, VAT code selection and all not there. Okay. But hereafter, the VAT code selection is mandatory. And Mashuda, come to the scenario. That is a transaction type. Based on the transaction type, you have to choose what type of invoice are you going to issue. Because if the authority want to understand what type of invoice are you going to, what type of supply are you going to make. Let's say if you issue an export invoice, what happens? There is no recipient identifier, and or you can't choose any identifier, right? So there is a specific predefined identifier given. Similarly, when you do a deemed supply, the receiver is yourself, right? So what is the receiving? So for these kind of scenarios, the authority has defined a predefined receiver identifier. So you have to you should know what are the identifier, and you should be aware of that when you raise in the e-invoicing scenario. That is another. I mean, it's not just that. I mean in the scenario of implementing e-invoicing, it is completely changing into a real time. So right now we have a freedom, we have time till 3 months. Okay, and whatever monthly is it? I mean, uh, most of us are actually settling the. Settling the VAT preparation and submission quarterly basis. So let's say take a real scenario. We get, though it is not the legal way, but we still get some time to issue the invoice or manage the invoice or do some adjustment, corrections, all these things we get time. But what happens in the e-invoicing scenario? It is going to be real time. Right, we raise the invoice, then and there the customer is going to validate and the authority is going to validate and it's over. So it is going to be reflecting in your data, in your, the output, input, as well as the FF audit file, everywhere it is going to be reflected. So or any changes that is in your process of raising invoice and delivering your goods, that will be definitely make changes depends on your process and function. I'm stopping here. It is not this. I'm just not lagging or taking. If this is one-to-one case, we have to understand or do an analysis of their current practices, or it may be your current practices, how it happens. This analysis is the first thing that we need to do. And what are the scenarios or type of transactions you do? What are the categories of invoicing you do? All these things you have to understand accordingly. You can have a gap analysis and understand what changes or what uh, process change you need to make in the invoicing scenario. I hope, Victoria, I've answered your question. Any questions, you can ask the follow-up question.
All right, so we have some more questions. Let me take the next one, which is eligible turnover considered on B2B customer or on total sales. Let's say you have 49 million dirhams as B2B and 1 million as B2C, or vice versa, 49 million as your B2C and 1 million as B2B. Even then, total 50 million will be considered as your total turnover. And yeah, to keep it very short, it's on your total sales. It is not like B2B transactions or B2C transactions. It is on total sales. I hope that I have answered that question, Pratnya Naik. So if there is any other follow-up question, you can put it. Then the next one is like, how will we get confirmation of invoice being acknowledged by customer? As now we generally get signature and sign on submission. So it's like very simple. You'll get it like, on your FTA portal itself, like, you on your ASP itself, you will get it validated. Your ASP will receive it, and from your ASP, it is being already, it will go to your FTA portal as well. So either through your ASP, which is being integrated to your accounting software, you'll get it acknowledged. It will be much easier than the traditional way of this signature and sign-on submission. It will be super quick as well. Then the next one is the restaurants who deal only with the consumers, not any corporate party like this. But buying the raw material from other businesses need to be shift on e-invoicing. All right. I hope your question is like, you are doing only B2C transactions. You don't have any corporate clients, but you buy from raw materials from other businesses. See, this is very tricky. So what really happens is like, you have B2C transactions, but then all your customers want you to like, issue electronic invoice. Then you will have to shift to this electronic invoice platform. There is no other go, because like, you need to receive the electronic invoice and you need to validate the electronic invoice. So in that case, yes, if your supplier mandates that you have to move, then yeah, you'll have to move. Do we register anywhere for invoicing? Yes, definitely. It's on you have to register and get your TIN number, which is already the first 10 digits of your TRN number. And then you need to get your PEPOL accreditation and make sure that everything is in order. And it happens everything through the EmaraTax portal. All right. In case of our company, we deal with regularly or weekly outside supplier. What the procedures? Same. In case you deal with regularly or weekly or daily, you have to move to this invoicing platform. If there is need to comment on invoice, like for example, for more details, is that yes, it is possible. Same like you can actually add more details, or you can send it as a supplementary document. That is what I was explaining in one scenario. Like you have some kind of retention calculations and everything. You have to issue it as a separate commercial document. That is a requirement. So please explain 50 million turnover. So the phase out now is for 50 million turnover companies before 6 months, and after 6 months, anyone who is less than 50 million. So technically, it's applicable for everyone, whether you are doing 50 million plus or less than 50 million. What you get is 6 months more extra. That's the only thing what you get. It's not like, okay, it's applicable only for persons who are doing more than 50 million. No, it's applicable for persons who are doing more than 50 million, less than 50 million. And you have two different deadlines. One deadline is 31st of July 2026. The other deadline is 31st of March 2027. That's it. So just as do you want to take the next question? I have no B2B sales, but
Yes,
B2B purchase.
yeah. I have no B2B sales, but B2B purchase are there. Then should I activate ASP? That's what, that was similar question. You can do it voluntarily, and so you have to see what is actually going to benefit you. For example, if you have a lot of transactions, and again the supplier's mandate, then it is better to voluntarily register and proceed. I mean, implement the e-invoicing system, and it benefits you a lot because the errors are reduced, and the data entry is not required, and your in output VAT will be perfect, and the rejection is easy, or validation is easy. It's already validated through the system. The FTA also validates. So it will actually going to reduce a lot of your headache, or it is going to reduce your ease your process. So if the number of transactions are high, you can opt. So you have to do a feasibility and implement. But maybe your question is whether it is mandatory or not. It is not mandatory. Is e-invoicing applicable for service industry also? Yes, it's not based on the industry. The criteria is very simple. Whether you do B2B transaction, B2G transaction, you have to do it. And is it possible e-invoicing without an accounting software? Without an accounting software or invoicing software, yes, even invoicing software is possible. If that, the only thing you have to ensure that the system what you're using is capable enough to capture the data you required. All right. For example, I mean, you know that there are 51 mandatory fields required for standard rate of supply. So based on what category, what scenario, what type of invoice you do, what type of transaction your company does, that based on that, the number of field will be required for your invoicing platform in order to generate the invoices in a way that it is accepted by the FTA. So whatever the platforms you use, ensure that that platform is adequate to generate the data. Also, so if let's assume that you are taking a scenario where I don't have a invoicing software at all. Okay, fine. Then let me tell you what complication is going to be. See, it is the one of the major thing what you need to do is data preparation for enabling e-invoicing. For which means when you issue an invoice to your customer, there are set of details that you need to fill up. Mashuda, could you please go back to the invoice manually readable invoice format?
Okay.
There are a lot of details that you need to I mean, you need to furnish in the invoicing to complete the complete invoicing process. So if you do not have a proper invoicing platform for that, then it will be a huge manual work, a lot of field to fill in the invoicing. See, look at this, how many fields are there, what amount of data is there. So it won't be easy for you to do that manually. So let's say the buyer details and seller details, once you store in a systematic accounting or invoicing software with the PayPal ID and the address, all these kind of details, once it is done, it is easy for you. Otherwise, you have to do it every time when you raise a single invoice. So to avoid that, you can have a proper systematic invoicing software. And if you are not using any invoicing software right now and you want only for the invoicing purpose, we can help you on that. Yeah, that we provide a wonderful service for that. We are foreseeing such clients. Yeah, that is for that. And 1 minute. This turnover is 1 minute. I lost where I stopped. Okay. There are scenarios of sometimes we make backdated invoice to month and target with the invoicing in place. Will this be possible? As we understand, it is real time. See, and the further question, do share some important data of the webinar. Okay, fine. Definitely we'll share the important data of the webinar. See here, the VAT regulation comes in place, the 14 days. So the date of supply. Straight away, it is date of supply you have to apply. I mean, you have to apply in your scenario. If that clearly says that if a supply is done, then when is the point of time that you have to consider in the VAT calculation, or when you have to raise the invoice. Within 14 days, you have to issue invoicing. That same law is applicable in the e-invoicing scenario also. You have, but once you generate an invoice, then you don't have a control on that. And once it is done, it is gone to the system, FTS system, and it is gone to your customer system. And what difference it makes as a real time? A real time in the sense, it is already gone to the FTA. In other scenarios, we raise invoices and we have time till the end of the quarter and the reporting time. Even if you want, you can make changes. You can raise a credit note, or you can sit and take time to review the invoices, or the customer may be later reviewing the invoice and comes with the comments or corrections. So that things will not happen. That all these things will happen in real time. But your question is something different. That is, if you can postpone the billing to the end of the month. Their scenarios are there that Dakshays are explained that the progress invoicing and all. But in a normal scenarios, the place of the date of invoicing is 14 days, within 14 days from the supply of your service or goods. So that is what here. If you have still questions, we can have a call or follow-up questions. Is turnover of 2025 is considered for eligible category? Of course. Yeah, straight away. Yes. If you have already exceeded 50 million, yeah, you are falling in the first phase. And that I believe this is a question. Okay, if you have any understanding change, definitely put in the questions. Then if the FTA will accept the issuing, for example, for software mobile app, definitely, whether it's mobile or desktop, the thing is the field, the mandatory field. The ASP will do the validation. If all details are there, or if all given details are correct, it will reject from the ASP itself. If you meet the field, a complete field, depends on what invoice you raise. If that meets, any type of invoicing platform is acceptable. We are a registered supplier of services.
This is let me take up this question.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. We are a registered supplier of services for a global company, and we issue invoices to their individual units per country. What would be the difference in e-invoicing for the units in the UAE and outside UAE? So let me try to understand the question properly so that, if there's any difference in the understanding, please do let us know. So I'm understanding it this way, that you are based out, one entity is based out of the UAE, and you are the registered supplier of services for a global company, and you issue invoices from here to UAE entities and also for the entities which is outside the outside the country. Okay, yes, we are based in the UAE. All right, perfect. So from UAE, you invoice to UAE companies and also to the outside UAE companies for which you are providing this supplies as part of this global company. So what really happens over here is like, provided you have to comply with the e-invoicing requirements, you will have to issue invoices for the entities which is based out of UAE. All right. And for the entities which is outside the UAE, as I've said in the last scenario, which is like export of services from UAE, you have to put certain fields as 0, and also you have to put certain fields as pre-defined numbers, which is given in the FTA e-invoicing guidelines. You have to follow that procedures and make sure that that proper code is being used in your invoicing. And then you have to send the invoice, as well as you can actually get a PDF of, or a commercial document, we call it, to send it to your client, which is based out of UAE, because they won't be having PayPal ID. Maybe they won't have PayPal ID. Maybe, if they're based out of in Europe, they have a PayPal ID. So in that case, we'll have to send the commercial, the commercial invoice, which you can download at the time you're making the invoice, and you can send it to the parties, which is outside the UAE. But inside the UAE, you have to issue an invoice, and there also you can get a commercial document, which you can send it to your clients. What about exporting? Same. Exporting is the scenario which I explained now. The predefined PayPal PIN for those who doesn't have it. Please do get in touch with us. We can actually help you with that. What is the predefined PayPal PIN which you'll have to use for this particular scenario? We'll have to do a scenario analysis for this, for sure, but then we'll be able to help you out with that. If one company has many branches inside the UAE and they're mutually invoiced transactions, transfer goods to stock, what is the process in this case? If one company has many branches inside the UAE, you mean to say the branch transfers? So branch transfers, you don't have to issue e-invoice because it's like, it's part of one company itself. But then you will have to have internal procedures in place and make sure that you're complying with the internal controls, so that whenever there is a transfer of goods which happens from one of your branches, you'll have to comply with the e-invoicing things. But then again, it's like an internal procedure which we'll have to evaluate and make sure that you're complying with the e-invoicing.
Yeah, yes, of course, if that is a group company, so you have clearly mentioned it is branch. So there are scenarios where group, TRN group, the scenarios, it is for 24 months grace time is given in between the group transactions. E-invoicing is not mandatory, but it is for 24 months. Soon you will be, that also will come mandatory. Just adding to this question, if there is someone in the group.
But any branch has different TRN. Again, it's a compliance issue.
Yeah.
You should not have a different TRN as the UAE law stipulates. If it's a branch, you're not supposed to have a different TRN. You're supposed to have one single TRN. We have a TRN expert here. The registrations department head as well. You have any other different opinion?
No, sir. If it's a branch, we are supposed to go through filing through the same TRN.
Yeah, they have to do the amendment, to correct it. So these kind of things are, going to make going to be changed. In a compliance perspective, there are a lot of things, there are scenarios we make, we have seen people make perform invoice. Actually, it's not possible. So this is not something we have to solve with the invoicing. We have to fundamentally correct that scenario. You have to, do the deregistration and get that specific branch added to your main TRN. So that's what you have to do first.
All right. Next question. Do you want to take it up?
what is the treatment for inner group of companies when all company have different VAT number? Group company, yeah, group company scenario, if it is registered group, then you have one. But in a different scenarios, I told you, in a group scenario, what happens, some of the companies will exceed 50 million and some of them not. Then what happens? Then the challenge is the companies who have exceeded 50 million has to implement invoicing right now, and the others will fall into the second phase. All right. So then comes the internal transfer, I told you. So internal transactions, you can, as of 24 months grace period is there, you can raise normal invoices. I mean, e-invoice is not mandatory. And when all company have different VAT number. So what kind of group is that you mean? Not clear. Normally group TRN has group company. I mean, in a VAT scenario, it's a one TRN. But you mean it's not in a VAT scenario, it's in a group of companies. If that is a scenario, it will be treated as a separate company.
Yes.
How
to keep
normally
it,
how you do the transaction? Sorry,
right.
sir.
To keep it simple, like, if it is like you have different companies with different VAT number, it is treated as it, since I said, as different companies, and you'll have to issue invoices for that. And again, we have a follow-up question from Fadil. By law, any branch has different trade license. Separate licenses, separate, you'll have to treat it as invoices. But I think there's a fundamental problem there, which we'll have to see and make sure that you're complying with the law. If any branch has different trade license, also you are not supposed to have different TRN numbers or tax registration numbers. All right, okay. Actually, Honor is same person. He has different companies. They have different license and different deal. All right, so in that case, what really happens is, like, it is treated as a different company, and you'll have to issue e-invoice. If it's applying to them, you will have to issue e-invoice. Simple and clear.
Yeah. So by this, we can conclude the day. The time is keep going running. So Mashuda, we can conclude the meeting. And dear participants, if you still have any questions, please do reach out us through our email and consultants. We have our number. Definitely we will be responding to your questions, all your questions. Yes, Mashuda, please.
Thank you all for your active participation and valuable engagement in today's session of e-invoicing. Should you have any queries or further concerns about e-invoicing, please feel free to reach back to us. Thank you and have a good day ahead.